Welcome to Narratives and Nightcaps. In today's special episode, we're talking to author Jo Ferrone. Jo is the author of Julian Dickerson and the Higher Ups and its sequel, Doreen by Doreen, which was released earlier this year, and why we're all here. So welcome, Jo. Thanks so much.
Happy to be here.
We are so excited to talk with you. So before we get into the book, though, because our podcast is called Narratives and Nightcaps, we like to ask what your go-to beverage is. It doesn't have to be a cocktail or anything. It could be coffee, it could be tea, it could be water, but what's your go-to, maybe like while you're writing or at the end of a day, anything along those lines?
Okay, my personal go-to beverage from the minute I open my eyes in the morning until I shut them at night, or try to shut them at night, which is understandable under the circumstances that might be a challenge, is coffee. I drink coffee all day long, gallons of it. I'm pretty much addicted to it, and being an addictive person, that's not hard. But I had thought about the special cocktail, and I thought, since we're discussing Doreen at some point, my new book, and Doreen is who she is, that probably sweet tea would be an appropriate drink. You could spike it with whatever you like. She and I can't indulge because we're both in recovery, but there you have it. I think sweet tea would be appropriate. I also love Yoo-hoo, and nobody ever mentions Yoo-hoo anymore, but I want to plug that.
Oh. I don't know the last time I had a Yoo-hoo.
Oh, good. I haven't had one in ages. I don't even know if they still make them, but it just occurred to me if I was thinking of my favorite drinks.
Those are perfect. I definitely think sweet tea is appropriate, and it works for everybody, you know? So I like that. And congratulations too on being in recovery and everything. So that's really incredible. Before we get into the book, which I want to talk about Doreen and the life force that she is, but I also want to know more about you and your background and how that's really inspired your writing and these characters you've created.
Okay, well, my writer origin story is that, I was a little kid growing up in Oyster Bay, Long Island. I was one of 8 children, so it was a really tumultuous kind of setup. My mom was like a drill sergeant because she had to be, just to manage. It's like herding cats, that many kids. You didn't get a lot of loving attention, and consequently, whenever an adult, singled me out, that was like, whoa, super cool, really rare and wonderful. And I happened to be in the 2nd grade, and one of our assignments was to write a story, an illustrated story. I wrote one about a little girl who turns into a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and gets eaten by a horse. I did the little illustrations as best I could. And my teacher really loved it and told me as much, and even, liked it well enough to have me walk across the little playground at our school and across the street. This was in the 50s, so you could still do that kind of stuff, and go to the library because she wanted me to give my book to her friend, the librarian, and her friend, the librarian, loved it. And that was the end of that. I was done. I was set on my career path. I'm like, I really had fun doing this, and, I'm going to get, noticed for it. So it was the whole package. But yeah, always as a little kid, I had a lot. I lived a lot in my head. I had a lot of imagination, and I just consider that I don't know whether that's a consequence of my environment or just who I am. They say 75-25. I just think it's a lucky thing that I've always had a capacity to make shit up.
Yeah, I think it could be a little bit of both, but I mean, you're not the first person or first author we've talked to. I'm thinking about, I want to say it was Allie Larkin too, where she was saying she recalled, sitting in class and like envisioning dragons outside of the window and all. So the imagination part, I think, is really, I don't know, it's a common trait amongst writers, but certainly not amongst everybody. I would even say that it's similar to like the people that have, not everyone has an inner monologue, but some people have an inner monologue too. And it's like some people have the imagination. So I love that you can pinpoint it back to like that specific moment in your childhood. I think that's so neat. And so that's really incredible. So, and way to go on your teacher for recognizing that too. And
Oh, love that teacher. I wish I remembered her name. I would send her, a dozen roses or something. She was so kind.
that, no, go ahead. That's amazing. That's really, really cool.
Yeah.
So I want to talk about Doreen by Doreen, but tell me, is it better to start by actually talking about Julian Dickerson and then talk about Doreen by Doreen?
Well, Doreen first shows up in Julian Dickerson's, and one book does follow the other. You don't have to read Julian first in order to appreciate Doreen, one would hope, but they do kind of go together. And yeah, Julian was basically I live in Miami Beach. I'm a New York City transplant. I came to my senses about 15 years ago. Somebody I've always lived in the cold in the Northeast, and I've always hated the cold. I've been, when I was a little girl walking to the bus stop, which I really did, no small violin. This is a true story. I would walk about at least 2 miles to the bus stop. And in the wintertime, when I'd be wearing my hand-me-down jacket that would never be long enough to meet the hem of my mittens. So I have this exposed wrist area that would get hives. I was literally allergic to the cold, and I remain so to this day. So in any event, 15 years ago, I realized I didn't have to live in the cold anymore, that there was this place called Miami Beach, and it had much of the cultural accessibility that New York offered me. It's very Latin, it's very international. There's a lot. I came down for Art Basel. I saw more art in 4 days than I had seen in New York in a year. It was warm, and you could wear flip-flops in January, and I fell in love. And here I am, and I don't plan on going anywhere. And I forget what launched that whole thing. Oh, so Miami Beach. Basically, my career was centered on this character, Fido Dido, who is a cartoon character with a triangle face, very simple black and white icon that was born in 1985. It was a response. My good friend Sue Rose and I were New York City denizens, and we were part of the whole club scene and club area and Paradise Garage and Mud Club and the art scene of Keith Haring and Jean-Michel Basquiat and all the stuff that was going on. So fashion and art and music were all sort of blending, gay, straight. It was such a cool time. It was right before AIDS came along and kind of ruined the party, but it was a beautiful, vibrant time in New York City. And I would sit with my friend Sue after work and have drinks and be like, we should put something out there, something that kind of expresses our point of view, in an interesting way. And she thought I was out of my mind. And I kept going on and on about it for a year. One day, we're sitting in our favorite bar, and there's this kid, John, who was a friend of mine, who was an adorable little gay waiter. And she drew a caricature of him, and everybody who was sitting with us admired it. And I took the bev nap that she drew it on, and I came back to work the next day and I'm like, this guy's name is Fido. And this is, the vehicle that I've been looking for. And so I convinced Sue, we put it on t-shirts. Long story short, it became a big deal, way more than I expected it to be. And that became my career. And that kind of took me away from the writing thing, but I sort of got to segue back in by being tapped for writing for children's animation because of the Fido connection. And I did write and subsequently produce a show called Angela Anaconda, which was a cut and paste animation. And oh my God, I had so much fun with that. And it gave me an opportunity not just to write, but to express my point of view, which is, life is not all Father knows best. We don't all start from the same starting line, and finish at the same finishing line. And it can be tough, but you always have your imagination, which is something that I could relate to. I could relate to having a relatively dysfunctional family and looking at Father Knows Best and thinking, what's wrong with, my setup? And realizing that that's not real life. And I wanted to give kids something that they could relate to in a real way. And also, suggest that imagination can get you out of all kinds of unfortunate situations. And it's really a good escape mechanism. And to also propose that the kids in the class who would normally be portrayed as the losers could be the actual heroes as they were in Angela Anaconda. So it was very exciting. I loved doing it. But, I had always wanted to write novels. And I thought, how can I write a novel if I don't have a story to tell? I don't want to do my autobiography. I tried that. It's too heartbreaking in a way. It's too intense. At least for a person like me. And it's not because I had this terrible childhood. I love my mom. I love my dad. We were imperfect, but whatever. I love my brothers and sisters. And, by all measures, I had a really fine childhood. But I didn't want to write my autobiography. And I thought, I don't have a story, that would fill a whole book. So I can't do it. And then about, 10 years ago, I was out in Long Island, and I was part of this little writing group, people who got together, and we would write one page a week based on a prompt, and we would take turns coming up with the prompts. And when it was my turn, I suggested that we write the first page of a novel that we could see ourselves, pursuing. I wrote 2 first pages, and I wound up subsequently realizing that if I can write 1 page, I can write a second page. And that's how you do it. So I wound up fully writing those 2 novels that I started on the basis of that little prompt. And then I've written quite a few since. So I don't know what the question was. I've gone so far off into the wilderness here.
Honestly, it's fantastic. I love hearing about it's your entire story and it's your whole journey. And that's what's so incredible to be able to really hear and learn from. And that ends up making these books that you now have what they are today. So that's perfect. But tell us a little bit then, I guess, about Doreen by Doreen. I know that she first came about in Julian Dickerson. And did you know right then that you were going to proceed with her story, or did that come to you later on?
I did not know that. And if I may just jump back, the reason why I started that other long fedrule with Miami Beach is that I joined a group called the Betsy Women's Writing Group, and started showing up at the Betsy Hotel. It was a once a week group, a bunch of older women who are delightful and brilliant. And basically, I wanted to join a writers group in Miami. I went to the hotel. I would sit in the lobby for an hour before the meeting started, and that's where I started writing Julian Dickerson. And for that novel, I proposed this painfully short guy who's got a chip on his shoulders, who's born into a hippie commune in Canada to crazy loopy parents. He's given birth in a hot tub in front of like half the community. And they're wild and crazy and druggy and reckless. And he is Mr. Straight and Narrow, who likes to go out of the compound and have Sunday dinner with the Jehovah's Witnesses that live down the street, cut from a completely different cloth. And he winds up being a teacher in a prep school, and and forbearing the fact of his incredibly diminutive size and all of the bullying and picking on him that happens, and becomes best friends with Lois, who is the prototypical diesel dyke phys ed teacher, and gets into all kinds of adventures with her and with Mitch, the bartender who owns the roadside place in New England, that's kind of doing poorly and then has some success. And Mitch's ex-wife is Doreen, and she leaves very early. Before we even meet her, she's already taken off to Las Vegas, Mitch goes home one night. The home is a mobile home, and his entire home is gone. The only thing that's left is a propane tank, because Doreen has found herself a boyfriend with a truck and a hit, and she's out of there. They go to Vegas. And then when she gets wind of Mitch doing better, she comes back and basically wants a piece of the action. And, her relationship with the other guy has long since fallen apart. Her dreams of being a Las Vegas showgirl have ended her up as a waitress in a diner on the outskirts of Vegas. And she's also in some kind of trouble with the law. So she tries to get in on the action and just makes a complete, fool and pain in the ass of herself in the process, and then takes off, with her tail between her legs on a Greyhound bus headed for Orlando, Florida, to go and live with her mother. And, I left her on her journey at the end of Julian Dickerson, but there was something, there was some unfinished business there in my head. Doreen did not leave me alone. She's like, you can't leave me like this. You can't send me off into the sunset in such an ignominious way and not do something about me. So I had to do it. And so I did. And I decided it would be really interesting to write Doreen in her own words, because the way that she expresses herself is so bizarre and grammatically incorrect and politically incorrect along with it. And I had a lot of fun having Doreen living in my head for a year.
She definitely has a very unique voice, for sure. What, I guess, was it, I know she just really spoke to you. So like, did you hear just what she was saying, or what was that writing process really like? I will say all of that, though, just makes her voice come through so clearly. Like, you can really hear her off the page. But what was that writing process like?
Well, it's, I have the same writing process for everything I hear, whatever it is. I feel like a glorified typist, really, because I just get the messages and I take them down. Doreen told me everything she needed to tell me, and I just copied down what she said. Yeah, I mean, you pull from every single little far away and close up aspect of your existence, of your life. All these little bits and pieces kind of come together, and you use them. And I think part of it is I like to listen to people. I like to observe people. I notice people. So where, the other author that you were referring to was dreaming about dragons, or making up stuff about dragons. I was kind of more making up stuff about real people, myself first. I was my first character. You know, I had a little car and I would drive around, and I was a lifeguard or this or that. But I kind of kept it on a very, down to earth human level. And I appreciate people. I really find them interesting, and kind of the more down and out or less glorified or whatever, it's like I'm not the person to write a biography of Churchill. I'm much more the person to, get into it with a character like Doreen. I want to understand what makes her tick. I want her to tell me who she is, and I want to share that. I don't know. That's the kind of character that interests me. So it's very easy for a character like that, coming from wherever these characters come from all the bits and pieces and some kind of divine intervention. If you ask, like Elizabeth Gilbert on her TED Talk, I find it such a kind of privilege to just share her with other people.
That's amazing. So like, from what you've been saying about your 2 novels, Julian Dickerson and then Doreen, I'm kind of picturing these more, I want to say, like misfit type characters. Like, they're not your perfect main character that has it all figured out. And I've also written, I'm sorry, I've been typing a couple notes as you've been speaking too, but they're kind of these like dream big characters that hit reality roadblocks. Do you think that's a fair way to describe it? And what do you feel has inspired that? I know you're talking about the people around you, but is there certain specific instances that really drew you toward these storylines or toward these character descriptions?
That's a really good question. And I have to say, I don't know where the heck it comes from. Like, another one of my characters is a Russian oncologist in the 1980s who is in a hole in the ground, imprisoned in Afghanistan, and his only companion is a mouse. And he tells his entire story to this mouse, and that's how the reader finds out what his story is. And it's a rather serious novel, and he's a rather serious character. But what he has in common with Doreen and Julian is that it's his redemption tale.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he is a somewhat glorified person in that he's a distinguished doctor, in his milieu, but he's also a very flawed character.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a lot to overcome. And in his case, the adversity that he experiences and the fact that he will lose his mind if he doesn't, make a companion of this little mouse, is what ultimately redeems him.
Mm-hmm.
It shows him who he is and what he's been missing, and a much, much bigger picture in a way in this little confined space. And then I have another guy who's like a rich kid with a horrible father and a very repressed stepmother, only kid. He is a football, he's a jock, and he's in college, and he's got all these, visions of, being in the NFL and being this, football hero and whatever. And that all comes crashing down in one way or another. And he's kind of an asshole. And by the end of the book, he's the greatest guy. So, there's a lot about redemption, I guess. Mm-hmm. And what is redemptive in Julian Dickerson is that, he's constantly put upon, he's irritable, he hates being short, he, hates being, discounted. and taken and teased and bullied and what have you. He has no joy. And he has no community and no human connections, really. He's got a miserable wife. You know, he's about to get divorced when the story begins. By the end of the story, you know, he's one of a family of friends and people that love him and that he loves. And hopefully, you know, it's not done in a corny way. It's just bumping along and catching a break here or there, or one person coming along and giving you, you know, a pat on the shoulder, or, you know, joking with you in a way that you can take it, you know, finding a person that you can trust, change everything. So yeah, it's about the flow of life and the connectivity of human beings, and you know, how we can ultimately rise above with a little bit of help from our friends. Whether our friends be a mouse or an Indian guru, or, you know, a Jewish accountant from the Bronx, or a diesel dyke phys ed teacher with a foul mouth, or whatever that might be. You know, there's somebody who's going to push us in the right direction. Yeah.
It ties so closely to, I've seen your mission mantra on your books and on your website, that it's an exclusive club that everyone can join. And it seems like that applies a lot to your writing too, which when I initially saw that, I was like, oh, I really like that as having that be your mission, but then that's also really reflective in your characters.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny because that line, it's an exclusive club that anyone can join, I originally coined for Fido Dido. And that was the idea, the concept behind Fido. It's like you had, you know, these venues that brought together all kinds of people, rich and poor, as long as you had a certain something to offer, as long as you were interesting or crazily dressed or had some kind of talent. You know, you were in the same venue and on the same level with the people who showed up in the limousines. You know what I mean? It's an exclusive club that anyone can join. That's
I love that. And I love the concept that it's, you can join it if you have, you know, like if you feel like you have something to offer it too. It's not just a sea of, I guess, sameness. It's a lot of uniqueness and individuality, and celebrating that.
Really good point. Yeah, exactly.
All right. I know we talked a little bit about, but I'm just curious, knowing you now, and also we've had Tabitha on the show before. How did you connect with Tabitha and Life to Paper for your book?
Well, I knew Tabitha, and I did not know any publishers, and I knew that it's a, you know, it's a very tall order to find a publisher or identify a publisher or find an agent in this world. I love Tabitha. I think she's really creative and really intelligent and really hardworking. And when she told me she was starting, I mean, otherwise my work would be just sitting here, you know, like others of my work is. But yeah, I was like, okay, you're doing this. I want to do this with you. Let me show you what I've got. And she took a look at my work and she liked it, and we took it from there.
That's amazing. Yeah, she is, and she's such a, to add to the list of amazing qualities, she's just such a bright person and so kind to be around. So that's amazing. I didn't realize that you had even known her beforehand, but that's really neat that you were like, let's go on this journey together.
Yeah. And you're right. She is such a doll. She's such a doll. Such a sweet human being.
She definitely is.
I loved getting to hear her story. Sorry, just to keep talking about Tabitha too. I really liked, I have not had the same privilege of Jo and you, Bree, meeting her in person, but I could just, the way she like even came through the screen when we got to talk to her, I was like, I want to be your friend.
Tabitha, if you're out there, we do care about you.
We
Yes, we
do.
care.
So Doreen by Doreen came out earlier this year. Talk to us about what that book release was like for you. What have the past few months been like, and having Doreen out in the world?
Well, it's great. It's kind of like having Julian out in the world, and I feel like I haven't officially launched Doreen. I'm going to do a reading at Books and Books on the 30th of this month, June 30th at 7 p.m. And that will be her official send-off as far as I can tell. I'm looking forward to that. And if you guys or any of your listeners happen to be in the neighborhood of Books and Books in Coral Gables, please come by. It would be amazing. So the soft launch was at the book fair. You know,
Yep.
Tabitha had done that. She puts together the best, I don't know, events, seminars, whatever. And so I had an opportunity to introduce Doreen for the very first time there and then. It was personally awkward for me because I was dealing with a health issue, and I did not feel well, but you know, I did my best, and you know, with the support of Tabitha and Monty and her crew, and you know, the people who were kind enough to show up, you know, it was a really nice occasion. So there's not much more to report on that. As I said, I think the real send-off for Doreen is yet to happen. This is a good warm-up.
There you go.
Good.
Well, I did not know that you weren't feeling well that day. So I'm sorry to hear that, but it definitely, as someone who was a total stranger, it didn't come across that way. I thought it was really sweet, and it was nice to have an introduction to Doreen. I can still picture and hear people laughing along with you, because for everyone, as Doreen comes out into the world, like, she is quirky and she is funny, and you can literally hear her while you read. And so it was really nice to be able to hear you read a little bit of it at that moment. But I'm sorry you weren't feeling well.
Oh, that's okay, honey. I mean, you know, that's the boring part. It just, you know, I'm just being honest. That's what was going on for me. I still loved it, and I was fine. I got through it, and here we are. And thank you so much for being there. Thanks for your nice comments about it.
Absolutely. I know you did have a lot of people come in to support. Is that the writing community that you were talking about, or you had a really great group of people there to support for the reading? I thought that was amazing.
It was mostly friends.
Okay.
And then I had a couple of friends that showed up the next day because they missed the date. But I love when stuff like that happens, because it makes me feel less bad about the times that I do that, which are many. So yeah, it was friends and some a couple of people from my writing group, and yeah. So.
Very cool. I want to, and I know Megan does too, but your cover art is so beautiful and vibrant. It just absolutely pops. How involved were you, or did you even want to be in the cover design? What was that like?
I am, when it comes to this, Tabitha takes the lead. She shows me different artists, different possibilities. I am just a yay or an air on all of that. and it's really Tabitha's handiwork at the end of the day. So yeah, I agree. I love the cover art, but I can't take a lot of responsibility for it. Just I say what I like and I don't like, and that's my participation.
No, that's totally fine. We hear rage, so we're always really curious about it too. And I mean, on top of that, well, now just reflecting, I'm like, every author we talk to, their covers are all so unique, but I think every single one we've ever had on, I'm like, I really like that. I really like that. Oh, I really like that one too.
I was curious with that question too, just knowing your background in, illustration, your creativity, if you brought any of that to the table with you. But sounds like, you know what, saying yay or nay, that sometimes is the best way to do the job. It just makes it a little easier.
You don't want them drawing anything, that's for sure.
Yeah.
For new readers of this, what would you compare it to if there was another book or a show, similar style? What would you compare it to say, hey, if you like this, then Doreen by Doreen is going to be something else you'll like?
Well, I flatter myself a lot to say this, but Schitt's Creek. I mean,
Yes.
it's like weird characters out of nowhere in these unusual circumstances, and the ridiculous things that they do and ways that they react, and that's very human. It's crazy, ridiculous, and human. And so yeah, I love that kind of humor and character.
I agree with that. Having been able to read some, I agree. It does. They're similar in that sense of humor, and what a fantastic thing to say, hey, it's similar to this, because I'm obsessed with that show. I can't tell you how many times I've watched it.
Isn't it the best? when Maura does when she's trying out for the Jazzy Gals, and she does that audition and does the fake stat, whatever. It is the funniest thing I've ever seen. It's really good.
It's so ridiculous, but it's too funny. It is. I have like 3 of my comfort shows, and that is one of them.
Yes. What are the other 2? What are the other 2?
The other 2, so New Girl is one of them. That's another comfort show for me. And then Dairy Girls is.
I love that show.
Oh, that show needs more attention. It truly is an absolute masterpiece.
It's genius. The nun. She is brilliant.
That show is too funny. Too funny.
Yeah. I love that show.
Are you good, Megan? Okay. I don't know, but that's okay. She's fine. She's all right. She'll come back. So that's a really nice connection. In terms of you personally, are there other authors that you resonate with, or certain genres that you like to read?
I'm all over the place with that. In some ways, I've always been the kind of person that if I hear a voice or an accent, I take it on. It's like when I was reading Dickens as a little kid, I was starting to think with an English accent. So, and as much as to say, I'm very suggestible. I'm like a little sponge. And so I've got to kind of avoid, when I'm writing, I've got to avoid reading something that is going to get in my head. It's like when I was doing Angela Anaconda, people were like, well, do you watch a bunch of kids' TV? And I'm like, no, absolutely not, because it's going to be, it's going to mess up my process or whatever. But I do love to read, and I love many, many different kinds of authors. I'm pretty strictly fiction. I'm not into nonfiction.
Us too.
Yeah, I like, I don't know, a million different I like, British murder mysteries and, I don't know, everything, everything. I don't know where to begin. I can
No,
have a armful of books right now and put them in front of the camera, and it's like, that's part of the answer.
yes, no, that's perfect. I mean, you're speaking our language because we're similar in that we both have kind of our specific genres that we maybe gravitate to, but we both read across the board. It's funny you mentioned the British murder mysteries though, because there was a period of time on this podcast where we felt like we were constantly like, and now we're set in London again, and someone else has died. And we're going back to London now because more people have died.
Yes.
And we're like, all right, we got to change it. Like, we need to do something else. Clearly, we're gravitating toward England and death.
Yes. It was like England, New York, and murder mystery. That was like the top genre that we were. And we were like, we need to like have happy stuff too sometimes.
But some of the murder mysteries, the English ones, are very happy, you know.
True.
But yeah, I mean, those I consume like candy. But yeah, there are all kinds. Pachinko, the sacred scripture, or the secret scripture, sacred scripture are a couple of books I've read recently. I read lots of different things. I don't know how to answer.
No, that is an answer. I think that's perfect. It's all an answer. It's kind of going back, but I want to add a little bit to it. I'm going to ask you a two-part question.
Okay.
Advice for aspiring writers as someone who had this initial interest very young and then has gone over a career that has certainly take you. I mean, I like to think that even though your actual writing career for the fiction novels didn't happen until later, that everything you did really led to that point. So part one is really advice for writers, which I'm going to guess, and this is part two, that part of that would be like looking to join a writing community. But what would you say to someone who is maybe intimidated by that, as since you were someone who like joined a writing community really before you had any of these works? What would your advice be to someone who's intimidated by that?
Well, I would say that you can't love yourself unless you can be yourself. And even if it's scary to be yourself, give it a try. If there's something that you love, don't worry about other people's opinion of it or opinion of you. Be yourself. You're a loved child of God. Embrace that. Be brave. And if you do it, if you put one foot in front of the other and put yourself out there a little bit, you'll start to get used to it. And that's how people get comfortable in their own skin. And as a human being with a point of view and a voice, you have every right to be heard. If people don't like it, not everybody's going to like it. That's okay. Maybe something you say will get across to somebody at some point and make a difference for them. And in the meantime, you'll be enjoying doing what you do and not have to be doing it in a vacuum. So go ahead and reach out. There are all different kinds of groups and communities. You can keep poking around until you find the one that's right for you. In terms of being a writer, I think it's a real blessing. I think it's so fun to be able to tap into different scenarios and characters and worlds and make stuff up. Some people base that on reality a little bit more. Some people base it on utter fantasy, and there are people who do it everywhere in between. I read a lot of books about writing. I've never studied writing. I didn't have the opportunity to do that. And I don't advocate against studying writing. I'm sure there's plenty that can be learned from incredible academic sources. But I've read a bunch of books. They're all different schools of thought. If you read Stephen King, it's all about discipline and routine and this, that, and the other thing. And a person like me, I read a book like that and I think I'm such a loser because I am not disciplined. I don't stick to a routine. I very much kind of, tap in when I feel like tapping in. And fortunately, uh, you know, there's some kind of internal timing that causes me to do that when there's something actually to tap into, something available for me to explore and set down on paper. So don't beat yourself up if you're not a specific type of disciplined person. If you are, good for you. God bless you. I admire that greatly. Do it that way. But for me, writing is really a process of listening in real time, and as I go about my life, trying to pick up on what people have to say for themselves and who they are, because it's the characters that compel me to write stories, and don't second guess yourself too much. Give it a try. Put something down on paper. If you don't like it, you can start again. If you have an inspiration to write about something, start. It's like me. I was overwhelming myself with the enormity of writing an entire book, whereas I didn't realize that if I just started the journey, and it is a journey, I would figure out where the heck I was going to end up. And in my case, I never, get aboard and know where I'm going.
Mm-hmm.
I don't need to. It's really fun just to sort of go along and be surprised at where you end up. I would definitely recommend checking out Elizabeth Gilbert's TED Talk, her original one on the creative process, in which she basically describes that her literary creativity comes from something beyond herself. I really ascribe to that idea. I don't know. I feel like I'm blessed in that this stuff comes into my head. And if I really, really hunker down and tried to make it all up, I would fail. I need to be inspired, and that inspiration comes from a source that I like to think of as divine. Because it's beyond anything tangible or anything that I can describe in a nice, neat little package. So be open to inspiration and do your thing.
That's very well said.
Yes, and I love that. Like, it's so true. There is no status quo of how to be creative, of how to go about your day, of how to express yourself. It's all just how you're feeling in those moments, what you see as beauty, as art, as just whatever comes to you as your inspiration. There's no set routine of how to harness that and then make it into something else. It's all just your timing, divine timing perhaps. But I love that there is no right way to be who you need to be in that moment.
Yeah.
And I'm just glad you said it, because I don't feel like it's said enough that like we all you don't have to fit into this perfect box to be able to write a book or make a movie or do whatever you want to do. You don't have to fit into a specific box. So, but it's just really well said. So I hope that it's impactful for someone else that listens, but I know that it's even great. Like, I appreciate it, and I appreciate all that you said in your journey. What's next? So I know you have an event coming up on the 30th for Doreen by Doreen. What else do you have going on? Do you have another book that you're working on, or are you just kind of enjoying the ride for now with Doreen?
Yeah, well, I'm going to enjoy the Doreen ride, but I always have another book going on. And it is a book about two characters whose names are Coffee and Bluette. And they're both married to John. And John is a eccentric, artist, architect, farmer. And they live in a sort of resort town and make their money by having people come and visit, with their kids and have a petting zoo and what have you. And there's a lot of, jealousy between Coffee and Bluette, although Bluette is a very passive, sweet character. So she just sort of takes it and, appreciates that nobody means any harm. She always sees the good in everybody. Coffee is a complete bitch to her, but she but anyway, I don't know where they're going. John has just died. He was in a junkyard trying to pull an exhaust pipe from the carcass of an Impala, and the whole car fell on top of him.
Oh.
He died doing what he loved.
That's super exciting. For other people that aren't in the Southeast Florida area, where can they find you? Where on social media? Anywhere special?
The Jo Ferrone on Instagram, which Tabitha manages so well. And I think I have a website, Jo Ferrone. And what else? Well, please come to Books and Books, June 30th, 7 p.m., Coral Gables. And you can buy my book on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. Please, if you do buy it and you do read it, whether you like it or not, do a review, because we need the feedback. Yeah, I'll be coming out with more books and more fun and games, and that's it.
Awesome. I'm just gonna emphasize that. Yeah.
Winwood. It's called Fido X Circular. It's my character Fido, and my friend Pablo has a line called Circular Gallery. He's very talented. We collaborate and do different things together. It's a super cool streetwear kind of store in Winwood. So Fido X Circular. Yeah.
Very cool. I want to emphasize really quick, because I don't think we say it enough on this podcast, but for listeners that read any of the books that we talk about, leaving a review is one of the biggest things that you can do to support any author, even if it's a single sentence. So please leave a review. You can also rate us on this podcast too while you're at it. That's really helpful. So just going to throw that out there, because we don't say it enough, but it is really important to authors and podcasters, not just ours. If you like someone else, please go rate and subscribe, because it means a lot to them. Jo, the next time I'm in Southeast Florida, I'm going to let you know, because I would love to see you again. I don't get down there very often, but I would love to see you again the next time I am. I used to live there, but now I don't live there anymore. But thank you so much for your time, for joining us, for sharing your story and your background, everything about Doreen. And we'll be sure to link to all of it in the podcast notes. So for anyone that's interested in purchasing Doreen by Doreen or wants to learn more about Jo, you can do all of that in the podcast notes.
Well, thank you guys so much. You're so kind and so fun to talk with. And, God bless you for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And best of luck with your awesome podcast. And here's a cover of Doreen.
There it is.
There it is.
Love it.
I got my copy too. Don't worry.
So, yeah, you guys are great. It's been really fun talking with you. Thank you so much.
It's
Thank
our
you.
pleasure. Thank you. Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.